think people feel climate change on the day to day. I think people, even if they don't think about it as that word, I think people see things like forest fires, they see changes in the weather. So I'd probably start there and just, recognize with those people that the climate is changing. It's always changed. It's continuing to change. But there's a real issue right now with the pace of which the climate is changing, and it's different than what it used to be. So as it changes, that might mean more water, less water. Whether that's for our day-to-day lives, and as simple as how often do you water your garden, or if it means working on a mining operation where you use water as part of the mining process. Those changes in water availability, can be challenging to manage. One of the reasons why the climate is changing so quickly relates to what we call greenhouse gas emissions. So these, simply put, are just the gases that are the result often of the use of different fossil fuels. So these are things like diesel, gasoline, things that we use as a form of energy to do things like move us around in a vehicle. So, pretty much all of us have been in a car before. You want to get from point A to point B. You put gasoline in your car. Maybe you've got an electric vehicle now, but traditionally you use gasoline, and that emits greenhouse gas emissions. And if you have too many of those in the atmosphere, that is pushing this change in climate. So there's a part of actually feeling climate change, but there's also part about this that's causing that change. And that's true for our personal lives and for mining companies. So at Teck, there's at least two areas we're trying to tackle here. One is around this: what is the source of energy we're using? Where are these emissions coming from? So Tech's got a number of commitments to sort of work on and play our part in society to tackling this issue of climate change. So on the one hand, we are committed to, and we're working quite a bit on finding ways to reduce our energy use or to switch the sources of energy we're using. So today we use a lot of diesel on our haul trucks, but what we're trying to do is look for ways to take those haul trucks, which are really used to move material, just large rocks from one side of the mine to another part of the mine area, and to look for different technologies or ways of doing that that maybe don't use diesel. Maybe they use electricity, which has been sourced from solar panels or something that don't emit greenhouse gas emissions. So we've got a large focus on that in the company, and my role supports a lot of that. There's a number of people in the company who have to think about this, whether it's from someone designing a mine and figuring out where you need to move the material, to people who are more focused on engineering and technology to look at what different technologies we could use to move those materials. The other part, going back to where I started, was, we are, as a natural resource company, in the environment. We're very exposed to the weather, to the climate. And so as the climate is changing, part of what I do and work with a number of others to do is to understand how is that going to impact our operations and how should we manage that. So as people who have water today as a necessity as part of our processes, we spend time to look at, are we going to have water? Or how much water will be available, 5 years out, 10 years out, 30 years out. And if what we're expecting to be there looks like it's going to change, then we need to take action to make sure that we're managing that. One of the most critical things that maybe I haven't touched on yet from a tech perspective, actually a mining and metals perspective in general, is that the world is going to transition to try and manage greenhouse gas emissions. So I think we see this in our everyday lives already. Electric cars are probably the most tangible piece to this. And for a company like Teck, that presents a lot of opportunities for us. So if we look at an electric car compared to your normal gasoline-powered vehicle, there's often about 4 times as much copper in those vehicles. So as a mining company, we can pause and ask ourselves, well, what does that mean for the future of copper demand? What does that mean for the different commodities that we're producing? And making sure that we're positioning ourselves to follow those trends, but to also sort of play that responsible role of supplying those resources that the future is going to need as we look to decarbonize society. Tech's always been committed to responsible resource development. We've been committed to energy efficiency, looking for ways to reduce our carbon emissions. But I think we find ourselves in a place today where the world isn't moving as quickly as it needs to. And Teck sees a role in helping the world transition faster, but also we're going to have to play our part to accelerate that change. We're going to have to reduce the emissions at our operations. We're going to have to supply the metals and the minerals needed for that transition. And I think we have to look for ways to do that in a very coordinated fashion and try and accelerate that action from where we are today. I think for myself, and I'm sure for a number of employees in Teck, one of our sources of pride is where we have successes in culture. I mean, we've got a lot of strong engineering, we've got a lot of strong technical pieces as an organization, but I think as we've seen through our safety journey, you need that balance of technical programs and initiatives and cultural pieces. And I think the cultural pieces take a lot more action engagement, and that's where you get that sense of pride from. So I think one of the largest successes we've had, especially in this space over the last 10 years, was the no idle programs that we launched, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago now. And I think what's important about that is, there's so many reasons that that's a good program. It's in one hand simple to apply because you just need to change your behavior. But I think there are financial benefits to that, whether it's reducing our costs on diesel. But I think we have a culture that recognizes and is committed to trying doing the right thing when it comes to sustainability. So the No Idle program also reduces GHG emissions, and that's one thing we've been working on for a number of years. So I think there's a sense of pride there that the technical solutions are required, they're great, but I think it's really neat, for lack of a better term, when you get a large employee base actually taking those actions. Some of it's for cost reasons, but I think there's what we heard from a lot of employees and what we see is there's a culture there, there's a value proposition, there's a value piece to people personally that, reducing our idling reduces emissions, and that's generally the right thing to do. Going back to this idea around time, I think there's a lot of opportunities to accelerate action. I think the first opportunity is the fact that we have a strong foundation now on the technology and innovation front. And so, I've been talking a lot about technology, looking for ways, whether it's using data or whether it's effectively helping mature technologies. I think leveraging all the effort we're putting in there, all of the intelligence and capabilities we have in the organization, in this spirit, going back to that culture piece right now of trying to be innovative, I think that's a huge opportunity for us to push forward on this. I think the other opportunity here is to leverage more broadly, both in terms of our industry, but in terms of society, of all the focus that's going on these new technologies. So, I've talked about electric cars so far. Another vehicle that people are looking to move towards batteries are buses. And so we're going to start looking at buses at our operations, not because buses are a significant source of emissions, but it's that step towards saying, okay, well, can you do it with the bus? Can you do it maybe with a loader? Can you do it with a haul truck? And so you're going to slowly build that capability up. And so leveraging, other areas or other technologies that people are slowly starting to tackle into our operations and leverage all that research, all that knowledge, I think is another huge opportunity for us. Anywhere starting from, if you're a mine planner and you're thinking about where we're going to mine, where we're going to move materials, and you're in a role like that, it's pretty critical to think about how far you're moving a material, how many materials, how much rock are you moving, because every additional, kilometer you move something is more diesel in that haul truck. So thinking about where you're moving materials or even what you're moving the material with. Is it a truck? Is it a conveyor belt? So, from the planning side, it's pretty critical. People who are operating that equipment, if you're a haul truck driver, if you're operating a conveyor, making sure you're doing that as efficiently as possible is pretty critical to this. I think we're also going to need to leverage all the sort of research and development type knowledge we have in the organization, because these are going to be new technologies, or we're going to have to look for solutions that we probably haven't even thought of yet that are going to help us out. So I think it's really critical that, people have that as their day-to-day job, but again, this is an issue that is so large that the ideas could really come from anybody in the organization. So I think there's some very tangible areas, But I think it's the type of topic, because almost all of us have some engagement or some touch point with energy usage in the company, that the ideas can really come from anywhere.